on the vocal minority.
Are you part of the silent majority? Or are you part of the vocal minority?
Well, let's go.
Attention, please.
If America can be saved, and I don't know if it's too late, but it'll be through radio shows like this new kind.
This shit here feels like a whole entire world collapse.
The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers.
It's the vocal minority.
The revolution will be live.
Today's guest is a 27-time Emmy Award winner who, before getting into feature film work, was a director and producer in both local news and network TV, directing hits like the sketch comedy series In Living Color, and working for NBC on shows including Meet the Press, The Today Show, as well as the Olympic Games. He has also been at the helm of numerous documentaries for MTV networks, including pieces on Stevie Wonder and Melissa Etheridge. He's an accomplished music video director who has directed videos for artists like NSYNC, Eric Benet, Master P, and Raphael Sadiq. He's currently working with Virginia State University and HBCU, where he makes commercials and documentaries for them. His latest directorial film is The Last Punch, the true story of James Cornelius, an Atlanta hustler turned boxing promoter who must somehow find a way to make Muhammad Ali's last fight a reality in the shark-infested waters of the 1980s fight game. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great Jesse Vaughn to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Hey, no problem. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. How's it going for you today?
Everything's good. It's hot and a little bit humid. I'm in Virginia right now and just loving everything.
So you're in Virginia. You're working with Virginia State University.
Yes, I have a contract with Virginia State University where I make commercials and documentaries, developing promotional materials to help influence young people to see the value of higher education. And so that's part of my hometown. So I really appreciate that opportunity to be able to experience that.
Very good. All right. And then so your latest feature film is in the wake of Muhammad Ali's death, that film, The Last Punch. I know it's not out for release yet. I know there's some negotiations with several buyers and distributions. Can you tell us a little bit about that film and then about the process that you're kind of going through currently with that?
Well, The Last Punch chronicles Muhammad Ali's last fight against Trevor Burbick. And
Okay.
We filmed in Atlanta a couple years ago. Right now, the film is completed, and the producers are in negotiations with distributors to determine what's going to happen with the movie, like whether it's going to make it into the theaters. We're thinking that it will. It just depends on how many screens. They're also in the process of talking to some people in Europe about distribution for international. So it was a great opportunity for me to be able to work on a film that chronicles the life of Muhammad Ali, because Muhammad Ali, for me as a kid, was a great influence. He helped instill in me, and I'm sure I think a lot of African Americans can say the same thing. He just instilled a sense of pride about ourselves and also instill within us the ability to be courageous in life, to stand up for truth. And so for me to be a part of documenting his life in the story about James Cornelius, a first-time promoter, it was a great honor for me. I just jumped on the opportunity. It was an independent film. Okay. Not a studio picture, but none of that mattered to me. It's just being able to be a part of just his legacy, that I still tap myself on the head and say, wow, what a lucky opportunity that was for me, because I enjoyed every aspect of that process.
So to speak a little more about the process and an independent film versus a feature film, those terms are self-explanatory, but as far as the process goes, where getting buyers and distributors and deciding what to do with the film, and now in this day and age with Netflix and Amazon and ways to get product to people, projects to people directly, and then with the international distribution. But how does that work?
Well, this studio picture that I did, Juwanna Mann, it's a totally different process in working with a studio and working on an independent film. First and foremost, the financing from a studio picture is much more substantial.
Right.
And you have access to more resources the more money you have. So, not to say that it's an easier process to make the film, because the challenges are in delivery. You really have to be on your A game to be able to work with a studio, because they expect a high level of excellence.
Okay.
Because it's an honor to be able to work at a studio to do a picture, and there's so much money involved. And then the plus side of working with a studio is there's already built-in distribution, because those studios are distributors. And so once a film is completed, they already have in their minds the process for distribution, because they own a lot of the theaters. Now, independent feature films, it's different in that the pressures are, I wouldn't say they're less on a certain degree in terms of the pressure, but then the pressures are more because you have so much less to work with in terms of resources. That is, money brings bigger talent. Money brings it's safe to say money brings more talented people, because there's truly talented people. They're expensive. And so studios understand that, and they'll back you with that. Independent, you have to be very resourceful.
Okay.
And I enjoyed that process. I liked that. When they sent me the script, The Last Punch, it was a script. When I read it, I said, oh my God, this is a $20 million movie. And we had nowhere near that kind of money. But I said to myself, well, I like that challenge. I like the challenge of being able to create with less, but at the same time be able to deliver a quality picture. And I think we achieved that. So right now they're in the process, the producers are in the process of negotiating with distributors, which is exciting.
Are you able to talk about maybe not specific dollars, but the amount of money that an independent film like this, just out of curiosity, if it's a $20 million picture, your budget's nowhere near that. What are you looking at roughly?
You basically want to ask me how much money we had to work with.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. I'm trying to be as polite as possible to be like, what kind of money, I mean,
that's part of the process of independent filmmaking. I know you're going to find it surprising. I never knew the exact figure of what we had to work with, but my guesstimate is probably around $1.8 to $2 million, somewhere around there. Producers don't like for us to talk about the actual cost on films, because when they go to sell, they want people to look at their product and disregard the actual monies that were used to make the film, and look at the market value based on the quality. However, with that said, anybody who's going to buy a picture, they're going to take a look at the books before they buy. Okay. And so you can try not to discuss that fact, but once the books are open, because they want to see who's owed what, are there any litigations? They have to go through all that process, because it's a very complicated thing to be able to get a film distributed, and they want to make sure that, everything's on the table.
Appreciate you disclosing that. And then, and then I'm not going to ask you how much money you made, but I'll ask you, the process works. Does it work where you and the actors, let's just talk about you, I guess. Are you paid upfront a certain amount, and then based on distribution, you might have additional opportunity to make more money depending on what it grosses, depending on the distribution model, or how does that process work? Are you able to talk about that?
Well, I'm in the Directors Guild of America, so all films have minimums, whether they're independent films or whether they're feature films. There are different tiers on the pay scale. Okay. So independent films under $3.4 million, they can basically pay you whatever they want. Anything above $3.4 million, they have to pay you a certain basic fee. So for me, this wasn't a job for me, a film that I looked at how much I could make. It was, for me, more being a part of a very important public figure who arguably, and it's actually, I don't even think it's arguably, is the greatest athlete, at least in terms of America, who, who's ever participated in the sporting world. My view of Muhammad Ali is that when you look back on America in 1,000 years, there are going to be a few people who are going to be remembered. And I would probably put him at the very top of the list, because he had that kind of dynamic personality. He had that type of magnetism that goes beyond centuries. That's my view. So I didn't look at this opportunity to say, well, how much can I make on this? Or, how do I get bonused out? That wasn't important to me. What was important to me was to make sure that I could participate in his life story. And quite honestly, when I read the script, I said to myself, one of the reasons I want to do this is because I don't want another director doing it, and they lack the passion that I have for the project.
All right.
And I said to myself, I want to protect this man's image and make sure that it's done properly. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to participate in the project.
Okay, so now, and that makes sense. So that gets to a question that I had for you, where how important as a storyteller is it to you to get your vision across when you're directing something? And does it vary between feature film, television, music video? Does it vary? And then also having to deal with the artist's vision or the producer's, but your vision as a storyteller, how important is that to you?
It's very important. I mean, everything that I do, there has to be a point of view. And usually the first thing I ask myself is, why are we making this picture, or why are we making this documentary, or even a commercial, or even a music video? I say to myself, what is it that we're trying to get across? What is it that we want the audience to learn? And if I can't answer that question for myself, then I'm not doing my job. And so when I read the script for The Last Punch, the thing that drew me to the story was the relationship between Muhammad Ali and James Cornelius, in that this was a man, James Cornelius, who persevered. He went up against Don King. He went up against so many people, even Ali's lawyers and his people. He had to fight his way through to be able to raise money and to pull off his last fight. So whenever I approach a project, the first question I ask myself, what is this frame? I work with a man by the name of Hutch Parker, who used to run HBO. This was years ago. And I remember going in there and working on a project with him. And that was a question he posed to me. He said, what is the frame? What are you trying to say? And I always remember that experience. And I said to myself, from that moment on, everything that I touch, everything that I'm a part of, I have to ask myself as an artist, why am I doing this? What's the point? So I usually come up with some type of tagline for myself. For example, for this particular film, I thought of the phrase, adversity introduces a man to himself. It's in those times when we struggle. It's in those times where we're having a really difficult go at it in life. That's when we find out what we're made of. And that's what made Muhammad Ali so great, because due to all the adversity that he experienced, the introduction to himself, he found that he was, in actuality, a very courageous warrior.
Right.
He may not have realized that at first, I'm not sure. But I would think that in terms of his hero's journey, he was able to discover within himself that adversity truly did introduce him to himself. And by being introduced to that kind of higher self within him, he was able to share that with so many people. And that's what made him a great inspiration. So for me, I just try to take a page out of people's lives like Muhammad Ali, and I say to myself, what's the point? And if I can't find a point of view, then I don't take the project, because I pour my heart and soul into everything that I do, whether it's something for $5,000 or whether it's something for $15 million. I give it my all. And so that's kind of who I am.
that perspective right there is deep, and that's why I wanted you on the show, because that's as an artist. I like to hear what artists say and how they describe their work, and especially for you to consider yourself that, because I don't know that we get to peel back the curtain enough and talk to, or at least I don't know that I hear enough directors really break down and go in depth into their vision. And you know, I wonder too, you know, so your vision is so strong. Does that ever cause friction? Maybe too strong of a word, but does it ever cause an issue with an artist or producer, you know, where you may differ in a way that causes an issue with the people you're directing?
Not really. I mean, the thing is, I think when your process is well thought out and it makes sense, I think people respect that, because you're not shooting from the hip. It's well thought out and it has depth. And, you know, there's an old saying in film, it's like, what's my motivation? Well, you have to understand what your motivation is. If you know what your motivation is, then there's no such thing as a writer's block. There's no such thing as any kind of creative block, because you understand where you came from. And by knowing where you came from, because it's well thought out, then you're going to know where you're going. So, you know, I'm probably a little bit more cerebral than some artists, in that, you know, I really give a lot of contemplation to what it is I'm trying to achieve. Okay. Although, you know, I worked with Stevie Wonder once, and I did a documentary on him for MTV, and I remember him saying in an interview, I always remember this, he said, spontaneous creativity is the best creativity. Right. Okay, so I've always looked at that and said, I can't be rigid in terms of my vision, because that spontaneity, that creativity that's found in the spontaneity is the most priceless creativity. In fact, the best creativity happens thinking on your feet. I mean, if you were to use a sports analogy, I'm sure when Michael Jordan did that famous shot, when he went up with his right hand, he switched to his left hand. Right. He didn't think, as I'm going down the lane, that's what I'm going to do. But that spontaneous creativity, he just allowed the game to come to him. He allowed it to happen. So a director has to think that way. They can't be so rigid. And this is just my point of view. I'm not speaking for all directors. I think you have to have room for the creative process to be spontaneous. I'll just give you another story. I remember working with Quincy Jones, and we were working on the Jesse Jackson show, and we were in an editing bay, and so Quincy pulled a seat and he sat it next to himself, and he didn't allow anybody to sit in that seat. And I turned to him, I said, Quincy, you know, why, you know, nobody, you have this extra seat here, but you don't let anybody sit there. He says, that's part of my creative process. I said, what do you mean? He says, I always leave an empty space for God. He said, wow, because I want God in the room with me when I'm creating. And that chair right there, that space right there is exclusive for that creativity, that universal creativity to be a part of the process. So, you know, I say all this to say, when you talk about a director's process, if a director does not, within their own creative bank, leave room for that spontaneous creativity, or leave room for a well thought out process, then they're not going to be successful at anything that they do.
And I understand that. And I'm glad you explained that, because, yeah, I mean, rigidity in any aspect of life, I would say is not good. You know, we need to be fluid. So especially when dealing with an artist, and that's part of the beauty, to be able to think on your feet quickly and embrace that and really, channel that and make some good work. So I can understand that. And it's funny that you mentioned Quincy Jones and the Jesse Jackson show, which brings us is the whole way I even discovered you, because I was watching the Dick Cavett show, old reruns. Right. You know, this one, I think it was from 1991, and Quincy Jones was on there, and you know, I think he's a god, you know, amongst men, as many folks do. But anyway, so and I like Dick Cavett. So I'm watching that not too long ago, and they're talking, and he mentions, what he's working on. He mentions the Jesse Jackson show, which you just brought up. And I'm like, I didn't even know Jesse Jackson had a talk show. Now, mind you, in 91, I was only 9 years old. So that might be why I didn't know. But anyway, so Quincy Jones is talking about the show when working with Jesse Jackson. And he mentions the director of the show, and he says Jesse Vaughn.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome.
Right.
I've never seen that show. You have to send it to me.
Yeah. No, I'll get you. I was on Hulu. All the Dick Cavett shows are on there, but I can send you a link over for sure. Actually, I'll put it in the show notes as well so the audience can see it. But so he mentions your name, and when he says your name and they show a clip of the show, I'm one of those kind of people. I don't like to think of myself as a nerd. Anyway, I look at the credits, right? So I just remember I feel like I've seen the name Jesse Vaughn a million times, throughout my life, right? I couldn't necessarily place it, but when he said director, and I was like, man, wait a minute. So then I looked you up and I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I want to talk to this man. Quincy Jones shouted you out, 25 years ago on the Dick Cavett show,
Well, Quincy had a tremendous impact on my life. When I was working on that show, he graced me with the opportunity to be able to call him anytime and talk to him. He mentored me, and I went to his house for dinner, and he was just a great guy. And he said to me once, I remember I was living in Washington, D.C., and I was thinking about moving to Los Angeles. And I was doing really well at NBC. I was, pretty successful,
right,
monetarily. And I said, but I'm going to Los Angeles. And I'm like, I'm giving up a staff position as a director for a major television network, and I'm going freelance. And I was a little bit scared. And so I called him on the phone. I said, we used to call him Q. It's like, Q, I need some advice, just anything. Just tell me something just to get rid of these fears. Cause, I was a little nervous, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, always believe in your talent and know that it will carry you wherever you want to go.
Wow.
And that statement has stuck with me my entire career.
Okay.
Because if you don't believe in your talent and you don't have confidence in your abilities. Now, when I say confidence is based on actually the development of your skill set, not just, some arbitrary, I'm a confident guy, but real confidence,
right?
Because you've worked on your craft. You've really, you put a lot of time into development of your skills.
Are you familiar with the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule?
No, I don't know that one. I'm not familiar with that, actually.
It's and I'll butcher it here a little bit, but basically he says that to become let's say to know your craft or to become, great at what you do, you have to put 10,000 hours into something. So, and that's what it sounded like, what you're saying.
Yes. Cause I'm a firm believer in that talent needs to be developed. There are people who are gifted, who are born with great gifts. But the majority of people, they still need to put those hours in for the development of their skill set. I mean, you look at a Kobe Bryant, who over the summers would shoot 1,000 jump shots. And
right.
So by the time the season came along, 1,000 jump shots a day he would do. And you look at a Tiger Woods who would hit 500 shots out of the sand trap, just out of the sand trap.
Right.
And he'd probably hit, over 1,000 balls a day. And then so when they got to play the game, they were ready. And that, even though that's sports, I think that applies to anything in life.
Of course.
That in order for you to be good, in order for you to work at a certain level, you have to put in the time. And so I understand that process. And so that's why when Quincy said that, it opened something up within me in terms of just don't be afraid, because it's harder to be afraid when you put the time in. When you put the work in, the fears become less. I just needed to be reminded of it. And so that's how he helped me in my path to, try to maintain a career.
Who better to get beautiful knowledge from than the dude, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's nobody greater. That's true.
You know, let me, now, was he wearing those, you know how his fashion has changed over the years? Well, you know what? I guess back in the 90s and 80s, he was still wearing the suits and the ties, but now, you know,
he's smooth, man.
But
Q, he was smooth.
I mean,
always smelled good, too. I remember I used to ask him, what kind of cologne are you wearing? Because people used to talk to him about his colognes all the time. He turned me on to his Creed.
Okay.
He wears this Creed. And so when he would walk in a room, he would kind of leave his mark in terms of his scent. And I was always impressed by that. Yeah, he's just a cool guy.
Oh, well, no, yeah, well, he seems to exude cool. I mean, for sure. Like, I'm just talking about his wardrobe. You know, now he has the classic look with the scarf and the nice shirt and the large cuffs and the kind of paisley design. So he's a bad man. You know, but he's on my dream list of guests too. But anyway, so I digress. But speaking of, I guess, phenomenal or interesting, fascinating people you've worked with. So you directed the Jesse Jackson show, and so what was that like? What was your interaction like? I mean, with Jesse Jackson, what kind of person was he in that interaction when you directed him?
Well, he was a person that was very concerned about people. He was very concerned about particularly African American people and what, was taking place in the everyday lives of African American people. So I was very impressed by his passion. And, I'll tell you the thing that's actually, when I think back on working with him, I'm convinced of this, that he must have a photographic memory, because that man had the ability to, be able to comprehend things very fast.
Okay.
And that always surprised me about him. Like, you would give him statistics, or you would give him information, and he was able to dissect it and ingest it and be able to kind of spit it out pretty quickly. So, again, that was an honor for me to be able to be a part of that particular show. I got a call out of the blue when I was working at NBC from my boss, and she called me one night. She says, I just wanted to call you because two guys came to the office today and they want to have dinner with you. And I was like, well, who's that? She goes, Quincy Jones and Jesse Jackson. I was like, are you serious? She goes, yeah. And so we went to dinner one night in Washington, D.C., and then we cut a deal for me to be able to direct the show. And a lot of my career has kind of been like that. It's real strange. I remember I had never worked with MTV before, and I got a call from New York City, and I was in Washington, D.C., and a woman by the name of Donna Wolf called me. She said, I saw your reel, and I want to do work with you. We want to work with you. And I was like, really? So she goes, and I had just quit my job at NBC. And she says, yeah, we want you to do a documentary on Stevie Wonder in Los Angeles. And I was like, wow, because Stevie is, of all the artists in the world, for me at that time, Stevie was number one.
Okay.
Because I've just always loved for what he stood for. And so my mom always jokes, to this day, she jokes with me. She goes, boy, you quit your job at NBC, and within 1 week, you're in Los Angeles working with Stevie Wonder. How did you pull that off? And I didn't really pull off anything. It was just, once again, it was just a phone call out of the blue. And that happened. The same thing happened on The Last Punch with the Muhammad Ali movie. It was a phone call just out of the blue. So I love those types of calls. I love those types of opportunities to be able to, that's that part of that spontaneous process that I really enjoy.
When you're open to things, it seems like the universe may give you those things. Let's talk about what got you there, being able to direct and be able to be in the position you were in working for NBC. So what got you into your love of film? Kind of a cliche question here, but maybe we can go a little deeper. Your love of filmmaking, is it the classic story of, you grew up loving certain films and you had a video camera, or what got you into, No,
actually, that's not what happened for me. I started, when I was at Virginia Commonwealth University. I was a sophomore, And I used to do these India Ink sketches. I was 18 years old. And so someone introduced me to a news reporter, Bernadine Simmons. And she saw my work and she said to me, "Have you ever thought about making television your canvas?" And I thought, wow, no, I never thought about that. So she said, "Why don't you go down to one of the local stations and use this phrase, 'I'll do whatever it takes to get my foot in the door.' Just tell them that." So I was able to get an interview at the first station I went to, Channel 6 in Richmond, Virginia. And I used that phrase. And they said, "Can you start this weekend as a studio cameraman?" And I was only 18. I was like, yeah, sure.
Right.
And
Wow.
so within a year and a half, I was 19 years old. I was directing their weekend news because the pay was very bad and the turnover rate was very high. And I didn't really want to direct, but it was just a process of elimination because television news is, at that time, was very challenging as a director. It's really difficult, a lot of pressure. But I did it when I was 19 and I was in college in the late 70s up until 80, 81. So then I went from there to a station in Northern Virginia, and NBC heard about me. I was only 22. And so they brought me over and said, "Look, you've been directing for 3.5 years. You're only 22 years old. You're the kind of person we want in our company. We want to train you with some of the top directors in the business." And I worked under a guy named Charlie Jones who directed Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. He kind of mentored me. And so I stayed at NBC for 10 years. So your original question was, how did you fall in love with filmmaking? Well, I always loved the process of creating. I always loved films, first of all. But I wasn't trained as a filmmaker in terms of movies, so I began to be self-taught. I got bored directing talk shows. I got bored directing television news. Actually, I kind of grew to hate it. So I said to myself, well, I've got to branch out. So I want to branch out as a filmmaker. So that's how it happened for me. I started doing music videos and commercials and documentaries. And one thing led to another, with my goal always being feature films and commercials and bigger documentaries. That's how it happened for me.
So was that a natural transition? Is directing no matter what the medium?
It's not actually that natural. I think the thing that I gained from working in television news was my ability to supervise people, a lot of people, a big crew, and also to think very fast on my feet. That's what I gained from that. But it's a totally different medium. In feature films, you have to understand storytelling. You have to understand story structure. And if you don't get that as a director, then, there's the technical side to it, which you can learn, but it's also the process of what makes for a good story. You have to be able to take the script and make sure there's certain elements in there that, in terms of its structure, that are going to make for a compelling story. And so it is different. It's completely, totally different. But I love storytelling. So it's kind of a natural transition for me. I mean, you get a script and the studio or the producers give a director a script and they say, okay, so what's your take on this? So I think the first take on it is being able to enhance the story quality. You say, okay, so you may look at the first act and there's certain elements that are missing. You need a stronger inciting incident. That's the moment in a movie where something happens to the protagonist that drives them towards making a decision to cross that threshold into another world, to be able to seize whatever it is, the goal that they have. So, so there's these elements that you have to make sure are there. And sometimes scripts aren't, there are weaknesses in all scripts. And I think the first thing a director has to do is to be able to look at the script, identify what the flaws are. And then there's the other side to it, is like, what style of pictures do you want to create? What is the message that you're trying to get across? And if that message is not 100% in the original script, then a director says, okay, so if this film is about adversity, introduces a person to himself, then there's not enough adversity to make that introduction, or there's too much adversity, or the person's not learning enough. Films are about a journey. There's nothing more boring than going back home and you see somebody and they've been doing the exact same thing for 25 years.
Right.
And you say to yourself, my God, that's just so boring. Well, that's like a movie. in a movie, you don't, your character has to change. Your character has to learn something. So these are the elements that a director can bring to the table to protect that process, that creative process of the hero's journey. Because sometimes, writers, they do their best in making sure all of that is there, but a good director will enhance it and make sure that it definitely is there. And so that's part of the creative process that I like. Then there's the technical side, and that's just creating a style of film. How do you want the film to look, and how does the camera play in terms of the capturing of the scenes and all of that. And so, that's just part of the whole total package.
Are you telling a story when you direct the news? Is that a weird
news,
question there?
I'm not a fan of television news anymore because
well, neither am I. So
it's a personal opinion, because when I first came up, it was all about presenting the facts as you see them as a reporter or as a producer, and then let the audience decide for themselves. Okay, I take the facts down, let me form my own opinion. Unfortunately, now a lot of the reporters, a lot of the anchors, a lot of all these TV hosts, they're inserting themselves into the story, and they're trying to influence you how you should think. If you watch Fox News, they do that. You watch CNN, they do that. So the reporters and the anchors, they insert themselves, and I don't care for it, because I consider myself an intelligent person. Just give me the facts and let me decide whether I like Donald Trump or not, or whether I like Barack Obama or not. I don't need you to tell me that this person is a bad person or a great person or whatever. Just give me the facts. And unfortunately, it's not like that anymore. So television news, as far as I'm concerned, has gone way downhill.
Okay, so let's transition into after you made your. Well, okay, let's talk about music videos, because you did some classic music videos that I know you did. Raphael Sadiq's "Ask of You," which is a classic, and also you worked with Eric Benet and
"Spend My Life" with Tamia. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's the jam, boy. That's see that.
Yeah, that's my favorite. If you were to ask me what's my favorite video, it's probably Eric Benet, "Spend My Life with Tamia." I really. It's just something about that video and that song I just really enjoyed. And we shot that in, I think, 12 or 13 hours. And how that happened, I have no idea. Because I look at that video and I just said, wow, it was just one of those well-orchestrated, well-oiled machines that day where everything just fell into place, perfectly. And I like the concept. I just love that video. And then there was Brownstone. I was Brownstone, If You Love Me, Past the Lovin'. I was kind of known at a time. I used to get approached to break new artists. And I always enjoyed that. Like I did NSYNC's first video with Justin Timberlake down in Orlando. And so I just enjoy artists, period.
What song was that?
If You Love Me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
No, that was Brownstone. No,
I'm sorry. I Want You Back.
Oh, yeah. Now see that this will show. I'll tell some about myself that I can picture. Yeah, I know that song real well, and
just
the video.
Don't say anything too scandalous now.
No. Because in that one,
we shot it down in Orlando at Universal Studios. It was pretty amazing experience, actually, to see the support behind that band so young. We knew right away. And then I did Missy Elliott's first SWV with featuring Missy Elliott, Can We? So I was kind of known for it.
Oh yeah, Can We Get Kinky Tonight? Yeah, Freaky Tonight. Yeah. Freaky Tonight, not Kinky. See, I'm terrible. Kinky, jeez Louise. Can we get Freaky Tonight? Right. That's the man. Okay, all right. So you were the go-to soul. Those are the jams, man. All right. So
yeah, well, I mean, there were a lot of great music directors out there. I mean, I never considered myself a huge music video director. I was kind of like at that medium level, but I worked, pretty regularly, and it was a great experience because back then, here's an interesting thing. I used to use music videos as a way to learn the craft. Like I would write, someone would say, okay, write a concept for a video. And I'd say to myself, wow, I've never worked with a rain machine. I'm going to write a video with rain in it. And I go, I've never used a Luma crane. I'm going to write a video with the Luma crane in it. So I was always trying to experiment on videos creatively just to work with new technology, because my plan was always to move into bigger and better stuff. And so that's kind of how music videos were kind of a training ground. And I made a list at the studios where I was considered up-and-coming talent to watch. And that was a result of my music video work.
All right, and then from there, that ultimately led to your, and you mentioned earlier, your feature film debut, which was Juwanna Mann, which I know it's one of those that, you know, it's between BET and all the other channels, it's been played. Man, that came
times.
Right, but they came out in 2002. Wow. Okay, so for that being your first big feature film, I guess big budget, but you'd already done so much and accomplished so much prior to that. What was it like to land that job? Were you looking for any film, you know, as a feature film? How was that?
Well, I just got a call. I remember reading the script about a year before I actually got to be interviewed for the film. And so I had an agent at the time, Sean Bryant, called me and said, oh, he's a manager. And he said, look, I'm going to get you in a meeting on this Juwanna Mann script. I said, oh, yeah, I heard about that guy, about a basketball player gets kicked out of the NBA, can't get a job, puts on a dress, and goes play in the WNBA. They were trying to make the Black Tootsie, is how it was pitched in Hollywood.
Oh, okay, all right.
So I got the meeting, and
go ahead, I'm sorry.
And basically a half an hour after the meeting, they offered a deal, and a lot of people were kind of surprised by that. I always say this about myself. I say, you know, I've had people tell me, you know, you're a talented guy and that sort of thing. I don't really buy into that. What I buy into is my passion. And I think the studio at the time, Morgan Creek, is Jim Robinson, David Robinson, Jonathan Zimber, and Billy Gerber. Those were the producers and executive producers on Juwanna Mann. I think what they were impressed with, even though they saw that I had a certain ability, what they were more impressed with is that I have a lot of passion for my work. And so that passion is, I think, what sealed the deal for me to be able to get that film.
And then now, did that lead up to? Now, what does that do for your career? Does that set some different expectations, and you expect to lead to different things and much more feature films? Because I don't recall
It probably should have, but I had a major setback in my life while I was filming. I had a fiance who was actually murdered. She was killed she was in Los Angeles and I was in North Carolina shooting, and she was killed while I was filming Juwanna Mann. And it devastated me. And so I took a major step back for several years. I had made enough money where, you know, I was okay for a couple of years, and I just needed to get my personal life in order. So it's sort of, you know, when you experience a tragedy like that, it sort of changes your perspective on life. Things that seem really important aren't quite as important. I think it affected my ambition a bit. I'd lost a bit of my drive. And so that's kind of what happened as a result of that film. So when I look, there's a film, I remember there was a scene, we were filming the day I'd just gotten a call that she'd been killed, and I still had to work. I still had to finish the day because, you know,
oh wow,
it's very expensive to do a feature film, and I'm sitting on a set, and the DP was literally standing behind me with his elbow in my back because I thought I could collapse any moment. I was just so exhausted, so emotionally distraught. And there was a scene in Juwanna Mann where Miguel Nunez is talking to Vivica Fox, and he says, I'll never forget this. He goes, you never know, basically, how important someone is until they're gone. And that's not the exact line, but it's kind of like that in the film. And I thought, wow, this is so crazy. I just lost my fiance an hour ago, and I'm directing a scene where they're actually saying that line. So it was pretty devastating. Yeah, it took me probably 5-6 years to recover from that.
Okay, wow, man. I
Nobody know. Not many people know that.
well, right, yeah, no, because and it's well, that's extremely unfortunate. I mean, that was that could certainly, I would assume anyway, and you just said can change the scope of someone's career and even the trajectory because it may have.
I had all kinds of scripts coming to me, and I just for meetings, not necessarily actual offers. I remember Like Mike came to me. They're like, we really want you to come in. I was not in good. I said, look, I'm not in great shape. I thought about going to Paris. Actually, I thought about going to France for a year just to get away from everything because I just felt the weight of the world on me. So it was a pretty intense time in my life.
You brought up obviously the tragedy with your then fiance. You said, but that wasn't the first time you experienced that kind of tragedy, right? You lost your father to.
That's true. Yeah, I did a TEDx talk, RVA. Actually, they were familiar with my story about losing my dad to murder when I was 14. And then later in my life, losing my fiance to murder. A tragic, unfortunate occurrence that happened twice in my life. And so they invited me to give a talk, and I chose to do a talk on the hero's journey and how life is a movie, and that we're all basically experiencing our own theatrical performance, and that sometimes in life we have recurring experiences because whatever lessons we may not get the first time, hopefully we'll get the second time. And so both those experiences really had me, the only way I could survive life, and even to this day, is it taught me to build what I call, I'm sure other people use this term, an interior life. Is that life inside of you, that spiritual life inside of you that makes you depend on a higher power. Because, I mean, when I think about life all the time, and I think about life a lot, I'm kind of philosophical in some ways.
Okay.
I realized that, I can't make it on my own. Even with friends and family, there has to be something greater that I have to lean on. And so that's been a part of my experience, and that's been a part of my lesson. Now, I'm not speaking for other people, I'm just speaking for myself. So certainly those were great tragedies, but those tragedies also introduced me to kind of building an interior life, or a higher power, or God, and however you want to call God. I don't profess to talk to people about any particular religion, but so for me, that's been an important aspect of my life.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I must be, because just how in the span of time, losing two people so important to you, even at probably two very distinct points in your life too. I would imagine. So,
but I also have a very strong mom.
Okay,
she's amazing. I mean, she's just an incredible woman who is far stronger than I am. And so for me, I've had the fortunate opportunity in my lower moments in my life to lean on her for strength. So that's always been a big plus for me. Yeah.
And it's good you had that support too, because obviously that's probably what kept you and helped make you get to where you are now, and where you have been. The circumstances surrounding their murders, are they solved crimes? Are they
both unsolved crimes? Both murderers, killers never got caught or prosecuted. In both cases, yeah, for my father and for my fiance. Yeah.
Wow. No,
but I don't think about that, actually.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I mean, some people are obsessed by, I got to find that person. I got to make sure that they're punished. I don't think like that. I think more in terms of, there are universal laws. There are God laws that take care of everything. And, I certainly could try to pursue, punishment on another human being. But I don't worry about that because I know there are certain universal laws, there are God's laws that take care of that. And so I give it to him. And that's kind of what I do.
Well, I mean, that's a beautiful philosophy. You said you were philosophical earlier, and it kind of reminds me of, I forget where I heard it, but someone said, or I read somewhere, they said, you could say, God, just have mercy on their souls. That's all you can really say, because
that's true.
Anything, and unfortunately, I have not experienced that level of tragedy, but me having that principle, that philosophy that, if you have that feeling or you can't find resolution, it is much easier to just say, hey, may God have mercy on their soul, because you know that higher power. So, I appreciate you talking about those things. And I guess more importantly, how they have shaped your life.
Sometimes, you're in the world and it's almost too much to bear. And so I say to myself, there's so many pressures in the outside world. There's an interior life, I think, that every individual can build. Something inside themselves, a place that they can go to find their joy and their peace, and they can just get away from this world. Because the world is filled with so much negativity. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's true. You turn on the news every day and they tell you about murders and killings and rapes and fires and all this stuff. We're just surrounded by all this negativity. But I always say there's a place inside of yourself that you should be able to go as an individual where you can find your peace and your joy. And that's a place, it's like your private oasis, your private abode. And you should always be able to go there. And that's what I learned from the death of my fiance and my dad, that I had to do that, because if I didn't have that place to go, I probably would have done something crazy, or I would be a totally different person. And it all relates back to my work as a filmmaker. It helped build my passion for what I do. It helped me realize that whatever I try to do in my life, to try to give it my all, to give it my best. And I think if I've had any success in my life, it's that people see that when they work with me, they know that I'm going to give my all. I don't care about how many hours I work or any of that stuff. I just want it to be the best. And so those experiences help shape who I am as a filmmaker.
So shifting from that and into filmmaking and getting into the larger question of, I guess, filmmaking and representation of Black stories and stories that we tell. But one of those kind of constant themes is always the media. It's always film and entertainment. And with that, you get into, the lack of representation. So for me, it's great to talk to a Black director, who's had some input in the stories that we see both on the large and small screen. So with that being said, with all the movements and everything happening, and the talk of, and Cheryl Boone Isaacs, president of the Oscars and everything, like, do you see, where do you see the conversation now? And what was your opinion on, our representation when it comes to recognition and then even just representation on the screen?
Well, my opinion is that as African Americans, we have enough money, we have enough power within our own communities to create for ourselves. And if others are not inclusive and not necessarily wanting us there, we're always looking for other people to tell our story. And I say to myself, well, is that really necessary? I mean, why can't we tell our own story? So I think, we have to empower ourselves to be able to solve our own problems and stop looking for people outside of ourselves to say, look, I'll help you solve your problem. No, we don't need you.
Right.
We can create our own product. We can write our own books. We can create our own films. We can distribute our own films. So we can get them out there best way we can. Now, do we have that huge distribution network? No, we don't. But do we have the ability to make our own product? And that's why I was so proud of Brother Ali. His name is actually Ali Muhammad and Dorothea Muhammad in Making the Last Punch. They went out there and they raised their own money and they got it made. And I think that's the road that we need to take. as African American filmmakers. That certainly being part of the studio process, if we can do that, that's fine. But if it's not available to us, then let's create for ourselves. And I think by doing that solves a lot of problems for us, and it also empowers us. When I think about it, I think, like, I look at Nike, and they have one of the greatest marketing slogans ever created, because it taps into our universal psyche, and that is just do it. And most people don't just do it. Just do it. Okay, so the networks may not open up to you. CNN may not call you and say, hey, we want you to do a Minority Report. But guess what? That's not stopping you.
Right.
You're still doing it. So I like that whole concept of just do it and let the chips fall where they may. Sometimes the chips may fall into a great success. Sometimes the chips may fall in what would be perceived as a lesser success. But there's not really lesser or greater. The fact that you're actually doing it, that's all that matters. So for us, as African American people, I think we just need to do it. We just need to create and not worry about what other people say about the process or not being inclusive or inclusive. None of that to me, I mean, that is important on some levels, but it shouldn't stop us. We just have to continue to forge ahead and just keep doing it. And that's why I love that phrase, just do it. And that's why your show is important. Your show is important because you're not sitting around waiting around for someone else to say, hey, let me hand you all the tools. No, I don't need you. If you want to be a part of the process, that's great. But I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
And I love that. I think that's so important.
Well, no, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that kind of motivation and those reminders there, especially from someone who's been through it and is still going through it. Obviously on a much larger scale, but the overall principle is still the same.
At some point, there may be recognition for a particular thing that you do. Maybe not everything that you do, but some things that you do may get the recognition. But the fact that you're still doing it, because what you're doing is something that you love. And the fact that you love it so much, and you're putting all your efforts into creating something out of your love, people are going to take notice. Whether it's 100 people, 5 people, or 5 million people, does it really matter? The process is you're just doing it, and you're doing what you love. And so, but then there's the other side to it where there's probably frustration at times. You can say, well, I want to reach more people. That may happen, that may not happen. But I always say, if you really love what you do, just do it and keep going. I just gave a talk to some students, and they were talking about failing and how they tried to put a project together that didn't work. And my reaction was, great. That's awesome. And you're like, what? But I wasn't successful. I said, I know you weren't successful, but guess what? You learn more from your failures than you do your successes. So don't be down on your successes, because your failures are where you really learn. The successes, sometimes we rest on our laurels, but the failures, that's where you really learn. So either way, whether it's success or failure, it doesn't really matter. That's why I say just do it. Just keep creating, man. Just always create, always create. You look at nature, and it's constantly creating everywhere. Trees or more apples, more flowers, more birds, more animals, more clouds, more rain. It's constantly creating. And I think as human beings, if we take a page from nature, we should do the same thing. That we should just keep creating. And the more we create, the more we just create, I think the happier we are, because that truly is our nature. Our nature is to be creative entities, to be creative beings. That's who we are. That's who we are at our very core. And so the more we create, the more we do, I think the happier we are, because we're tapping into that's our nature.
Wow, you know what, man? That was really powerful, and it caused me to think about. And you tell me what you think about this. So when you talk about nature, I picture trees or plants or as long as they're living, they go through their cycle, but they keep living. As long as they're not dead, they might be down, it might be brown, or my knockout roses, will die, but when they come back with a vengeance, and
that's true. That tree might be producing some rotten apples, but it's still producing apples. And it says, you know what? I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up, because I love creating.
Right.
Whether the apples are beautiful or whether they look horrible. I have an apple tree in my yard. It's not doing so good, but that apple tree is still kicking out apples.
Right, yeah, it's right. It's gonna kick out, and one of the days those apples are gonna be nice and ripe and beautiful, right. And at the end of the day, it's still an apple. It's still a live, living. Well, let me not get too out there. I was gonna say living, breathing apple tree, right. but it's man. Okay, wow, all right.
Well, I mean, you're doing your thing, and just keep doing it. Just keep doing your thing. Keep talking to a lot of people. Keep talking to artists, putting the issues out there. Just keep creating. Doesn't matter, how accepted it is. Who said, one person's going to say your work is great, another person's going to say your work is terrible. I have people come up to me and say, "Man, Juwanna Mann is the funniest movie I've ever seen. I've seen it 10 times." I've had people come up to me and go, "How the heck did you why did you work on that movie? That movie's a piece of crap." I look at them and it's something that I say to myself. It doesn't matter what they think. For me, I just created it and I enjoyed the process, and it doesn't matter what people think. Just keep creating. That's what I say to you.
Yeah, and that's interesting though, because it's very hard to judge someone, and I feel like we probably do this a lot as a society, or it's done for us, where you judge someone's whole career or even life's work, or your whole view of someone is skewed by your opinion, right or wrong, or whatever is your opinion on, a certain piece of their work. So all the,
and you don't even know them.
Right. They know nothing about you, know nothing. Right. And especially so it's, if those folks, and this is saying no criticism one way or the other of Juwanna Mann, but just saying the fact that if you were to have a dialogue with this person, they were to look at your resume and see the Emmy Awards, and they were to see all the work and everything that you've done in your career, including Juwanna Mann, which is a well put together film. And I'm sure, there's a million reasons you could tell us, and everyone could tell us why that movie is a good film, and it's a good movie, a funny movie. But the point is that you've done so much, and to even have the nerve, or as my daddy would say, the unmitigated gall to come up to you and tell you that's a bad. But I mean, everyone's a critic, though. I mean, I certainly I know I've said things about people's art, but again, as things have progressed, I'm like, I view things differently now, though, because again, that was because you don't know what that person was doing, and it's still a lot of folks are entertained. So we spent tons of time on Juwanna Mann, but I might have to go. I haven't watched that in a while. I have to go check that out, because I like Miguel. Miguel Nunez is I like him a lot, because the first thing I think of when I think of him is Pretty Ricky from Martin. He was
right. That's true.
Pretty Ricky, what they call him. That's what.
Right.
But anyway, and Vivica Fox was so fine. But
you should get Miguel on your show. I'll get him for you.
Oh, hey, all right then. Okay, well that's easy. Well, then I'd love to talk to Miguel. So. White directors telling black stories, black directors telling black stories. What does that look like to you? Or, is that ever a consideration, or in this medium?
Well, I think that, sometimes there are situations, I think, where, like the James Brown movie, I think that, I don't think the filmmakers understood James Brown. James Brown was a very deep fellow, actually.
The one with Chadwick Boseman, the most recent one, that one?
Right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, that's kind of a classic situation. I think that when I think about the bigger picture, I say to myself, some of the top producers and directors who are inside the studio system, they should be vying for their own production deals. Like George Clooney has a production deal. He has a production company inside. I think it was Warner Brothers. It may not be Warner Brothers. Brad Pitt has some of the deals. So I think our bigger stars should be looking for production deals for themselves inside the studio system, and then developing those projects they have passion for and using their influence to create those works. There's no reason why some of the top African American people, did not create the James Brown story, or even the film Ali, Muhammad Ali. Although George Jackson, who's no longer with us, he did New Jack City and Jason's Lyric and all those.
Oh,
along
okay.
with Doug McHenry. Doug told me a story last year about how they actually walked into Columbia Pictures with Muhammad Ali and tried to convince. This was many years ago, and they tried to convince them to do a motion picture, and they said no. But cut to many years later, they got Will Smith and Michael Mann to do a motion picture on Muhammad Ali's life. So I think we have to level out influence and our marketability to be able to create those works. That includes all the big stars. I mean, they have production deals, then they have influence. And I love what Denzel Washington is doing. He's Fences. August Moon.
You're right. August Wilson, right? Yeah, right.
August Wilson. I'm sorry.
Right.
He's doing Fences, and he's doing that particular product, and I think that's great for him to level his influence to do that. And I think more of our top actors should be doing that very same thing. And then, we can stop and say, look, we're doing all that we can for the creation of that material, and not necessarily, looking outside of ourselves for other people to solve our problems of being inclusive. That we're part of that process of being inclusive, and we have to do that. We have to do that.
No, I right. And so as far as the representation goes, so a lot of it appears that 2016 might be the year of the Slave movie or the Slave, retelling rejuvenation with Roots and Underground. What's it called? I think it's called Underground on WGN.
Right.
And there's a Matthew McConaughey picture.
Right.
And I think there's even another one. It seems to be a lot of slave movies coming out.
Birth of a Nation, right?
Right. Okay.
That Turner story. Right?
Oh, okay. Right. So, and with that, is obviously for me, I'm like, I'm not really interested when I see clips of any of those things, and I really want to support the black actors, the working black actors and actresses in those films, But part of me is like, damn, is this the only job that a Negro can get? Where, and obviously that's a, but then I also have talked to enough actors to know that, a job is a job. And, as long as you're not truly, losing your integrity or your dignity, then, a job is a job and a project, even with you're playing a slave, especially these are powerful pictures or projects that, mean something. So, and it's a job with a check.
Right.
So my question, I guess, in there is it a double-edged sword? I mean, should we embrace?
It is a double-edged sword because on the one hand, we should always continue to tell our story. So it'll never happen again, and there are a lot of stories within that part of our history that are still untold and still need to be told. The problem is there's a lack of balance. It's like, where's the common story of the middle-class African-American family?
Right.
That's going through whatever they're going through. Or it's either one extreme or another. It's either about, gangster rap or slaves. It's like, where's the in-between? And so I think if we had more of the in-between, there probably would be less complaints.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, right. Yeah. If we shine a light on the normal parts of on the other parts of society, the in between.
Right.
That's a better way to say it. The interior, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like it's the one extreme or another. I mean, that's kind of what's going on. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, it's also fortunate. We are able to tell, Straight Outta Compton, which I thought was a great film.
Right.
And then 12 Years a Slave was a great movie.
You know what? I haven't, I've got my aversion to slave movies and I categorize all of those and I don't mean to disrespect, was it Steve McQueen and all those folks, by saying that, but I haven't seen it and I don't know that.
Great film.
And I've heard that enough. So I guess with your endorsement, I'll go check it out now. But it also took my father like 5 years to get me to see Django. And not that I'm not comparing.
Django for me is another story. I wasn't crazy about Django.
Talk about what's the issue with Django? Cause I like Django from the perspective of my black father born in the 50s likes that movie because Jamie Foxx gets to fuck up a lot, and we cuss on this show, so pardon my French. I hope I don't offend you, but he gets to he gets to fuck up a lot of white people, and and so and my father gets off on that, but I never wanted to see the movie prior to that, just because I'm just kind of out of any depictions, not made by a black man, and I'm over those stories. I'd rather watch a documentary on some true stuff, or watch some compelling drama or some comedy or whatever. So I say that to say it took me a long time to see Django. I finally saw it. I was like, okay, I can dig it. I get the role of Jamie, and there's good acting in there. Was he French? I can't.
Yeah, the guy. I forget his name.
Right, but he's really, it's really good acting, good cameos, and Jamie Foxx does a good job, blah, blah, blah. So, all right. So those are my glow. And I guess, DiCaprio is, his character's pretty good too, but the Sam Jackson character didn't really do anything for me like it did for a lot of folks, but that's another topic. Okay. But so in that, what is your criticism or your critique or just your opinion of that movie, since we're talking about it?
It's just a question of style and taste for me. It's just not my kind of film.
Okay.
That's just me personally. I thought it was over the top, and it kind of made a kind of a comical view on some levels of the whole slave industry. It was just too over the top for me. I'm not a Quentin Tarantino fan, so I don't like his feeling that he can just abuse the N-word so much. It's irritating to me.
Okay.
And he's catching me in shallow moments of my own personality where it's hard for me to get past that. It's like, okay, enough of that. All right, can we get back to the story? And so sometimes he throws me off with that, and that's why I'm not crazy about it.
Right. No, and that's certainly an opinion that is shared.
It pisses me off actually when I'm in the theater. I'm just like, okay, I got it, man. Do you have to say it 38 times in one scene? I got it. Okay, can we move on? And so then I sit there, and then it irritates me, and so then he loses me as an audience member.
Do you think that? Is there a burden on the actors who say those lines? Because I cut them a lot of slack. Like I said a minute ago.
Here's the power of the director's chair. When I first got The Last Punch, they had Muhammad Ali using the N-word in the movie, and I said, I'm not filming that.
Okay.
What do you mean? I said, we're not doing that. I'm not doing that. And I explained my reasons for it. I said, look, he's an icon. He's a cultural icon. He does not need to travel down that lower path where then the discussion of the film is distracted upon the use of that N-word versus the creative substance of the story itself. And so that was my decision, and the producers understood it, and we took it out. I talked to the actor who played Muhammad Ali, Karan Joseph, and Karan Raleigh, and he agreed, and so we took it out. So for me, it's that's just a personal decision on my part. I'm tired of us kind of denigrating each other with that word, but that's me personally. Not everyone feels that way because there's the argument of what is the intention behind what is said. So we can say that word without any negative intention behind it, but if someone who's not African American uses that word, what is the intention behind that word? It has a totally different meaning, and I understand that. But so for me, when I watch Tarantino, I just can't get past it. It's like he's beating me over the head with it, beat me, and I get so frustrated with it. I'm like, I can't take this anymore. You've taken me out of the movie because you just pounding me. I'm not into the picture because he's starting to affect me on an emotional level that I just can't flow with it. So that's why I'm not a fan. But that's me personally. I don't think he's a bad filmmaker or any of that. I don't trash his work. It's just not my style of picture. I mean, some people like certain pictures. Some people like other types of pictures. His type of picture, I don't care for.
No, okay. All right. Well, no, that makes sense. And that's a good note to wrap this conversation up on. So okay. We'll wrap it up now so you can get to the rest of your day out there in Virginia.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the show. I look forward to being able to hear the 35-minute interview.
Yeah, right. No doubt. Yeah. Hey, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the episode, our conversation with director Jesse Vaughn. Lots of good perspective. We went down some roads that I did not plan to go down, but I enjoyed it. I like the spontaneity as he discussed, and his thoughtfulness and insightfulness when it comes to vision, and also, on Tarantino and the use of the N-word and everything else we discussed. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Please make sure you go to iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend, use the hashtag The Vocal Minority. You can tweet us at Vocal Report, send an email, vocalreport@gmail.com. Check out the Facebook page, leave a like, invite your friends to like the page. Please share, help us grow, and we'll talk to you next week. Peace.